The libs have an insane post office meltdown. 9/11 tribute in light is canceled here in New York City. A guilty plea finally in Russiagate. And Philly wants you to turn in your guns for your safety. Welcome, everybody, to the Buck Sexton Show. Thank you so much for being here. I missed you all on Friday. I'm sorry I had to be gone for a day, but it is very good to be back. And now here I am. Here I am, ready to tell you about all the things happening. Oof, I'm excited that this election season is now fully upon us because we got to get through this thing. We got to get Donald Trump reelected. We have to move on to the next 4 years. I'd rather, that feeling you get before the big game or before you know that the onslaught from the other side is coming and you just want to get it going. I feel like we're in it now. Finally, it feels like we're really in the midst of an election. Up to this point, there's been such a focus on these externalities or these other issues, but now every day it's clear we have the ticket for the Democrats. The DNC is happening this week. Because who's going to really care about that? It's a worthwhile question, I think. Oh, a virtual DNC. Ooh. But the biggest issue right now, the biggest political fight, the back and forth, other than the usual things, which we'll get into today, COVID response and law and order, the lawlessness that Democrats have embraced. Biggest thing I have for you today is on the post office. That's right, former employer of Newman from the Seinfeld show. And the post office is not something you would usually think is at the center of a major election debate, but it is because, well, the libs have completely lost their minds. They are in a panic about this. They are freaking out because they say the president is trying to defund the USPS, the United States Postal Service, that this is actually happening right now. And this is underway. And over the weekend, as I was down in North Carolina, I would check in on Twitter occasionally, see what was going on. It was very apparent that they would see that liberals out there would see things and immediately, like the boogeyman of Trump was appearing from inside the post office box. There were claims that post office boxes were being removed as part of this Trump plot. And these things were going viral. There were claims that there were locks on post office boxes as part of this plan, as part of this plot. And sure enough, it's all complete nonsense. But the fight is not over. Here's what we need to know about this. And before I get into the rundown of what's really happening, they even had a protest outside of the Postmaster General's home, because that's a really constructive way to have your voice heard if you're a complete psychopath. They decided that they were going to gather together and try to frighten him. DeJoy is the man who is the Postmaster General. They wanted to get together and terrify him. That's somehow going to advance their cause about how we need the Postal Service. So here's what's really going on. Okay, the conspiracy theory stuff, let's dispense with that first. There were some photos shown of USPS, those blue mailboxes that we all know being picked up and moved. That's not unusual. That's just consolidating and making sure that they're trying to be more efficient. This is a big part of this. I'll get into it. The locking the post office boxes. I mean, some of these are actually security measures so that people can't do this form of phishing where they'll actually steal stuff out of the post office boxes by going through the little envelope slot. But none of this had anything to do with Donald Trump or even the fight over funding. So this was just all paranoia, but it's really out there. I mean, Taylor Swift, that's right, the famous pop star, to her, 100 million Twitter followers. She has an enormous Twitter following. She tweeted out, Trump's calculated dismantling of USPS proves one thing clearly. He is well aware that we do not want him as our president. He's chosen to blatantly cheat and put millions of Americans' lives at risk in an effort to hold on to power. Now, you might say, Buck, why are you even giving a second thought to Taylor Swift's thoughts on election cheating and tampering and the United States Postal Service? And I'll just tell you, unfortunately, there's no special status. There's nothing in pop stars that doesn't allow them to influence the opinion of their legions of ignorant fans. So Taylor Swift says this, and you would say, well, Buck, obviously, what does she know? The answer is like nothing other than, how to hit that high C and dance around and write some songs. While that's all true, the truth for the electorate is that she still carries a lot of sway. And that people will read that and they'll say, oh my gosh, Trump is trying to steal the election by destroying the USPS. As if he's able to do this so rapidly, as if this is some plan. Oh, we have Representative Maxine Waters also said, this was on Twitter, we're all hearing from seniors. They need their medicine, their groceries, they need their disability and Social Security checks. Why are you harming us by slowing down the mail system and destroying the USPS? Don't you understand how important the system is, right? We're all supposed to be so upset over this. Well, here's the problem, Maxine Waters. For one, Social Security checks don't get sent in the mail anymore. I would hope that a member of Congress would know that, but I hope for too much. Here's what's really happening. All right, at the very top level, at the 30,000-foot view, Democrats are pushing for a massive change in the way that ballots will be cast this election. And this is our media class, because our Bolsheviks are journalists, and they are incredibly ignorant, and they don't care to know what they don't know. They just know that they've got talking points, they've got propaganda that they want to spew. And our media class is out there now insisting that there is no difference between absentee ballots and universal mail-in ballots. Now, there are some variations state to state, but in general terms, you have to apply for, you have to request an absentee ballot. So an actual human being has to make a request for an absentee ballot. There are chain of custody controls over that ballot, and there's an entirely different procedure for it that's in place and has been in place for a long time. I voted absentee in the 2008 election because I was overseas, I believe. Yeah, I was overseas in Iraq, I think, at the time. So that's something that people do, and that's well established. What Democrats are demanding is that everybody will just get ballots sent out to anybody who's on the voter rolls. So you don't have to request it. They're going to send out. So there's going to be live ballots everywhere, all over the place. There's going to be live ballots just getting sent out. And there's no chain of custody. No one knows who is getting it. Do they still live there? What state are they in? This is an astonishing open door for fraud, which is why the Democrats want it in the first place. And President Trump addressed this with universal mail-in voting. Play 17.
As you know, the Democrats aren't approving the proper funding for postal, and they're not approving the proper funding for this ridiculous thing that they want to do, which is all mail-in voting. If universal, you could call it mail-in voting. Again, absentee voting is great. You request, I'm an absentee voter because I requested, I got, and then I sent in my vote. So that works out very well. That's what we've had. But now they want to send in millions and millions of ballots. And you see what's happening. They're being lost. They're being discarded. They're finding them in piles. It's going to be a catastrophe. So, and this is beyond the post office. But Louis DeJoy is working very hard. The post office has for decades lost billions and billions of dollars. I read numbers today that are unthinkable. And what they want to do now is hit the post office with millions of ballots from certain states. And if you look at what happened in New York and Virginia and various other places, it's a catastrophe. They're losing 20% of the votes. Nobody knows what's happening.
They are losing a lot of ballots. We've had delays, over a month of delays in a New York congressional race because of all the mail-in balloting. There are preparations that have to be taken for this. There are procedures that have to be put in place. And there is time needed to do all of that. We don't have that. Democrats are making this demand. And as I've said to you, and I really do believe this, if they did get universal mail-in balloting and they lost, they would claim that universal mail-in balloting that they had demanded was the reason they lost. That there was cheating, there was fraud, Russia, whatever. It doesn't, you have to keep in mind, it doesn't have to make sense. Their arguments don't make sense. It's emotion, it's shouting, it's the mob. It doesn't matter. If they can get away with it, if it works, they'll say it. What's really going on with the post office? What's really happening there? Turns out, and this is a shock, I'm sure, to none of you, it turns out that the post office is losing billions and billions of dollars. In fact, since 2007, USPS has lost $78 billion. And its usefulness is way down. We are entering an era of Amazon and Zoom and everything virtual, and they still have some postal routes where they're delivering mail down into the Grand Canyon by donkey, and where people sometimes, employees, of whom there are 600,000 USPS employees across the country, but in some instances they will travel almost 200 miles a day to hit a couple of hundred mailboxes. This is highly, highly inefficient. They constantly complain now they've had to prepay some of their health benefits for the USPS. They claim that's the problem. This was a reform in recent years. But that's not the problem. The problem is the USPS is poorly run and is losing a whole lot of money. We're talking about almost $100 billion over a decade. That's real money. That's all just the taxpayer sending checks to the USPS. This is a system that has been failing for a long time. And I understand that Democrats love this for a number of reasons. One is they always will say things like, we can't privatize. What about the post office? What about roads? Those are the two things which are mentioned in the Constitution, but are not, in fact, stated as sole obligations of the state. Liberals forget that. There's not a constitutionally created post office. There's just the government can create a post office. And it did. But maybe it doesn't need to anymore, or maybe it needs to dramatically change it. Postal overall mail volume hit its peak in 2006, 213 billion pieces of mail. As of last year, it was down 33%. If you're running a business, and remember, that's not pandemic times. That's last year. That's 2019 with a booming economy. If you're running a business during a booming economy and you're down 33% over the course of a decade, you're in trouble. You're going to have to dramatically restructure, or else you may face bankruptcy, right? That's the reality of it. And yet with the government, they can always claim they need more taxpayer dollars. With the government, they can always claim that there is a next step, a next phase for them. Oh, that's right. We, the people, write a check. That's what the Democrats are demanding here. But the post office has been failing for years now. You know, like the failing New York Times. No, the post office really has been failing for years. And all of this stuff, these conspiracies, DeJoy isn't up for this. DeJoy, who is the Postmaster General, they keep calling him a mega donor. Yeah, he's a donor to Trump. He also took a trucking company, from 10 employees in 1983 to 7,000 employees. And he stayed on as the CEO of XPO Logistics when it bought his company, which is a supply chain business. So this is kind of like having a mini Jeff Bezos, in a good way, running the post office, which is a good idea. When was the last time you went to your post office box and looked inside and were like, oh, this is great. I got all this great stuff. 50% of what you get in your mailbox is marketing, which is a nice way of saying junk mail. That's why I always say environmentalists are unserious until they stop. Think of all the resources, wasted paper, wasted printing. They got to get rid of this junk mail for us. Then I'll listen to them on the recycling and all these other things they want. Well, we're just masses. I go to the post office box that I have mostly to take things out of it to throw out so that they don't completely fill up my post office box, my mailbox, I should say. And then there's no room for the bills. That I get bills and I get junk mail. That's it. Like once a year, I get a wedding invitation. Thanks, producer Mark. High five. That's it. And yet we're told that it's all because Trump wants to destroy it. It's all Trump's fault, you see, once again. He's destroying the post office, even though it's funded already until 2021. What's their complaint? He doesn't want to give the post office $25 billion of bailout money for being poorly run for years. That somehow turns into Taylor Swift and various celebrities and Alyssa Milano and all these other just complete airheads with big followings telling people, oh, the post office, he's destroying it. It's a plot. If we don't shut this down right now, the post office mania will become the Russiagate of 2021 if, God willing, Trump wins. You wait and see. I know that's so crazy that it sounds like I might be just pushing this a little, but think about it for a minute. What could be crazier than Russia? And they did that. You don't think that they'll say that Trump hobbled the post office on purpose? Of course they will. From #1 New York Times bestselling author Brad Thor comes his latest thriller, Near Dark. Near Dark is the latest in the Scott Harvath series. This is a thriller that is a #1 New York Times and Wall Street Journal bestseller. Look, they say you can't put a price on freedom, but the world's largest bounty has just been placed on America's top spy. He's got to unravel the enemy's deadly plot before darkness prevails. His only hope for survival is to outwit, outrun, and outlast his enemies long enough to get to the truth. But for Scott Harvath to accomplish his most dangerous mission ever, one that has already claimed the lives of people closest to him, including his new wife, he's going to need help, and a lot of it. Who can he trust? He finds an unlikely ally in a Norwegian intelligence operative who's just as smart, just as deadly, and determined as he is. Pick up your copy of Brad Thor's Near Dark. Again, Near Dark, the latest in the Scott Harvath series, today.
I think folks in Montana understand that the Postal Service is a critical lifeline for our rural communities and folks who live in remote areas. And it's true, it's about voting, but it's also about folks being able to get their prescription drugs. It's about folks being able to get their parts and their packages on time in a timely manner. I mean, the Postal Service is something that is critical for rural America. And to watch this Postmaster General destroy the Postal Service under Trump's direction, and to watch Mitch McConnell do nothing to try to stop that. And by the way, or anybody in the Republican Senate caucus stop him other than just give lip service is disgusting. I'm going to tell you that if these guys have their way, they will destroy the Postal Service. They'll do it because they don't want people to vote, which is bad enough. But in the process, it's going to hurt rural America in a big, big way and hurt rural states like Montana in a big, big way.
Destroy the that's Senator John Tester. Republicans and Trump want to destroy the Postal Service. It's funded already until past the election. The slowdowns that have occurred have to do with COVID-19 and resources. Right now, that's been going on for well before this debate, this discussion even came up. There's even panic over eliminating some mail sorting machines, which could also be used for ballots come election time. So they stopped doing that, even though that was just consolidation and efficiency, because they're not using some of these things because there's not that much mail compared to what there used to be. It's all junk for the most part anyway, right? 50% of it is junk. They don't care. I can't believe we lost our home that we didn't even sell. That's what Deborah said when she found out that she was the victim of home title theft, which is a crime that can actually cost you your home. Here's how it works. The bad guys find your information online, then they forge your signature stating you sold your home to them. Once they've got that information, guess what? They can do this, and there's very little you can do to protect yourself because the usual identity theft services don't make a difference. Go to HomeTitleLock.com. Use promo code BUCK. That's the way to get yourself protected. HomeTitleLock.com, promo code BUCK. You can get 30 free days of protection, plus you can check to see if you're already a victim of this crime. HomeTitleLock.com, promo code BUCK. How can the Democrats be confident that there won't be massive fraud? I love how the media just assumes that this is it's a nefarious Republican plot. Meanwhile, we've done this on smaller scale where you have mail-in balloting. We did it in the New York congressional election. There was a big study that came out about mail-in ballots and voter fraud in New Jersey. Here's Senator Booker, former Democrat presidential candidate. I think he got more support than Kamala Harris. I can't remember now. Play clip 4.
Paterson, New Jersey, there were some problems with mail-in voting, and there are charges of mail fraud there. I know that voter fraud is infinitesimally small. Mail voter fraud is also very small also. But how do you convince Americans that that can be prevented on a larger scale?
Well, thank you for stating the facts. It is infinitesimally small. And one of the reasons why mail-in balloting fraud is so easy to catch, as even Mitt Romney pointed out from Utah, a state that does it, is because there is a paper trail. You can compare signatures. It is very hard with all the information you have that it takes to go through voting by mail to pull off any kind of fraud. So New Jersey people tried to cheat and they were caught, as often will happen when you try to do something like that. And so I'm very confident, number one, that this is rare. Number two, if people try it, it'll be caught. And number three, we have the evidence of states from Oregon and Washington to Utah and Colorado that have been doing this for a very long time.
Let's be very clear. There are states that have procedures in place to do this. They have been doing it. What we're talking about, what the Democrats want, is for everyone to just do it. Oh, okay, everybody just get a mail in your ballot. Everybody gets to mail in their ballot. And that means they're going to have to send out ballots to everyone because they're not going to have polling centers open. Or if they're going to have polling centers open, there's still going to be millions and millions of people in states across the country that aren't prepared for this that are sending in their ballot. It's not even clear really what they want, other than they want to demand vote by mail. And they've wanted this for a long time. Ballot harvesting is one of the major considerations or one of the major concerns, where now you might have somebody who goes door to door, because everyone, theoretically, let's say everybody in your community, your neighborhood, gets a ballot sent to them. You can walk around door to door and say, hey, have you voted yet? And somebody comes and says, oh, no, I haven't. Say, oh, well, don't worry. I'll take it and I'll give it to you. Just sign the bottom. Oh, and someone decides that they're going to check off the box, or they're going to X out and check off a box. We're really going to think that in a presidential election and a national election, remember, Congress is also at stake here, as well as all the down ballot races that are going to be happening in places across the country. We're going to pretend that there's some super sleuths that are going to be comparing all the signatures. And this is a mess. It's going to be a disaster. It's obvious that it would be a disaster. But Democrats feel like even if there's a lot of fraud and nonsense, at the end of the day, if they have more votes, they got more votes. Even if some of the votes cast were fraudulent, they'll claim victory. And if it doesn't work, as I've been saying, they'll say, oh, see, there was fraud in this election. I don't think they'll be able to pull off the Russia thing again. I don't think they'll be able to do that again. So they have to come up with something else. And that's what they're doing. And whether it's, Schumer, Pelosi, they're all focused in on this voter fraud thing. One of the reasons why? That the COVID numbers are turning clearly now have turned downwards in Arizona. The hospitalizations are down 30 to 40% from their peak a month ago. In Florida, I mean, you're starting to see this. Oh, it's starting to go down. New York says that within the next week or two, they're going to open gyms. So their whole game of just keep everything locked down, oh my gosh, lock down as long as possible, they're still going to try that, but that's getting more complicated. They've got to throw other things in the mix too, which is why you've got Schumer out there talking about how this is all Trump cheating in the elections. Play 10.
Donald Trump is aimed at hurting the elections. He has said, this man has no limits, unlimited gall. He says he wants to slow down the mail to hurt the elections and make people doubt the results of the election. Maybe he's worried he's going to lose. It doesn't matter. Our elections are sacred, and to do this is disgraceful. The postal system is well loved by America. 91% of America approves of the postal system, but it's now being 100% undermined by the Postmaster General, a political hack appointee of Donald Trump.
Political hack appointee, he calls him. I told you that this is a guy who took a company from 10 employees to 7,000. That's a trucking and logistics company. I think he might know something about running a business where you're moving stuff from place to place. Has Chuck Schumer employees as CEO? No, has Chuck Schumer ever really run it? No, he's in the business of Chuck Schumer. Give him the donations, give him what he needs, and he'll tell you whatever you want to hear as a Democrat. Sounds a little bit of a similar accent to Fauci, but fainter. So here we are with this big kerfuffle over mail-in balloting, mail-in voting, and it's because I think Democrats, one, need to set narratives in place where Trump cheated no matter what. They need their side to believe that Trump is going to cheat. That gets turnout going, and then they will claim he did cheat no matter what happens. Right? So that's happening already, guaranteed. Who else is on this? Oh, Nancy Pelosi. Whoops. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said she is mulling bringing back lawmakers from their August break to address the Postal Service controversy. And the House Oversight and Reform Committee on Sunday demanded DeJoy and other USPS officials testify at an emergency hearing on August 24th. I mean, next Monday, folks, next week. Chuck Schumer has accused DeJoy of trying to undermine the USPS and call for hearings in the Senate. Bottom line, we will not stand for the in-your-face slowing down of the mail and time undermining of Americans who depend on medications, paychecks, even food. Will not allow this to happen. No way, Chuck Schumer says. Barack Obama says that there's no need for conspiratorial spin. Those in power are undermining the Postal Service in the run-up to an election that is going to be dependent on mailed-in ballots. That's all from the Wall Street Journal today. Friends, the Postal Service is already having service delays because we're in the middle of a pandemic. The Postal Service has been having delays even with far less mail because of what's happening throughout the country. What is going on that's affecting the rest of businesses? And there should be changes that are made just so it's sustainable. They should probably get rid of Saturday mail. Packages are one thing, but Saturday mail delivery, they should probably get rid of that. Maybe even another day during the week. They should scale some of this back. I go to my post office box, I'd say every 2 weeks. 2 to 3 times a month I check in to take out all the junk mail, all the stuff about, 20% off here, 5% off there, but it's never really stuff that you want to buy. I get rid of all that. That's what the Postal Service is. That and like the IRS saying, you owe us another $100 or something. That's what the Postal Service provides for me. And I'm sure I'm not the only one. And they've been slow, and they've been slowing down this past year well before there was any call for mail-in balloting. The downturn in turnaround on our mail and also the loss rates on our mail, all these things, the post office is a poorly run business. And DeJoy isn't even the guy that they're saying, oh, the Postmaster General who's in Trump's pocket. He responds to a board of governors, not even Trump. So Trump isn't in a position to order him to do anything. And he was on a bipartisan committee that nominated him. It was unanimous. The guy is perfectly qualified to do this job, but they're just attacking him because they attack anybody that is even a little bit associated with Trump. But I'm telling you the truth here. The post office is under stress and cannot handle the things that they want it to handle. And this has been the case for a long time. This has been the reality.
I don't know of any evidence that voting by mail would increase voter fraud. My biggest concern, frankly, with regards to voting fraud has been that there would be some kind of hacking of our voting electronic systems. and that voting machines or tabulating equipment would be hacked either by an American or hacked by a foreign entity. There have been efforts to do so in the past, but I would prefer us providing additional funds to states that don't have as effective voting systems as we do here in Utah for voting by mail. I've heard some people say they think that the reason the president doesn't want people to vote by mail is that polls show that people who want to vote by mail tend to vote for President or Vice President Biden. People who tend to want to vote in person tend to want to vote for President Trump. And so this is a political calculation.
Mitt Romney doesn't know what the heck he's talking about, but that's never stopped him before, it seems. I don't know. I go back and forth between, am I embarrassed that I voted for this guy in 2012, or can I at least give myself the solace of knowing that he was the least bad option? But it's still a little embarrassing. At least I didn't vote for Evan McMullin in the last election. I voted for Trump. Thank you. And was supporting him the entire time during once he had gotten the nomination, unlike some other conservatives who have jumped on the train a bit later in the process. I also never called Trump an idiot on my radio show, which some people who were really big supporters of Trump, let's say, if you go back, you'll find out they call him an idiot, which I think is so interesting. An idiot! So, with all of that, I will tell you this. When Romney is making the claim that there's no, or this is also Booker, other people have said this, that voter fraud is so rare. The Heritage Foundation had pulled together a sampling of election fraud cases from across the country. There are over 1,071 proven instances of voter fraud with 938 criminal convictions. That's what we know about with very lax controls. That's what we know about with very few things in place to prevent it. Why would we assume that it wouldn't be much more widespread? And keep in mind, they always say, why would anyone do this? Why would somebody who is a senior FBI official lie in a form to surveil Carter Page? Because he did it. Belief, ideological reasons, who knows? I can't begin to get in the minds of everybody who wants to cheat the system, who wants to do whatever they can to help the left win or help the Democrats in their quest for control of all of us. But when you start to look at these cases, there are cases of fraud that are caught, and it's a very small percentage of the actual fraud that occurs. As I've told you, think about tax fraud. You don't hear about that many people getting prosecuted for tax fraud. How many people are cheating on their taxes? Huge number of people. Huge number of people. There is $80 billion a year, they estimate. Now, this is for money, so I understand the incentive is very clear. $80 billion a year Medicare fraud. You think they're catching all the Medicare fraud? Pretty difficult to do. Unless someone... What happens is it's so easy that somebody gets greedy and it becomes egregious. That's how people get caught. They start billing for millions of dollars that they don't... of treatments that they haven't actually given anybody. But that's what you end up seeing, right? Those are the ones you hear about. With the fraud that's caught, it's usually because someone was really reckless and also tried to tip an election. Those are the ones you hear about in the media. Ballot harvesting, all these games. I also believe that there should be election protections and that there should be a process. And I think the process should be that you go and cast your ballot. I think there should be some civic duty here. If they can tell us we have to sit on a jury, they can tell us you have to show up at the polling place and vote. And let me also say this. People that are claiming that they're so worried and it's unsafe, I'm going to talk to you more about this. I was down in North Carolina over the weekend, and there are whole parts of the country where people are living their lives and they're living pretty normally. It's in these blue places like New York City, where I currently am, that everyone has to live in a constant state of quaking fear. But they will go out and march. They will gather in crowds. Libs did this over the weekend. They will gather in crowds to protest having to vote in crowds. Once again, we see the coronavirus, COVID-19, the China virus, as Trump calls it, is making determinations, is distinguishing, according to Libs, between worthy causes and bad ones. And who gets infected and who doesn't relates to their politics. At least that's what you have to believe if you listen to the mainstream media on this, if you hear what their opinions are on all of it, right? So the fraud issue is very real. And we have to know that Democrats don't care. They always think that fraud will benefit them. And go back. I mean, LBJ stole election, JFK, or I should say the Kennedy family, known to have stolen elections. There's plenty of that going on. And one other reason why they're focusing on this right now is that things are looking a little bit tighter for good old Joe Biden. Their weekend at Bernie's campaign isn't looking like it's going to be a walk in the park after all. There's a little bit of a morning in America feeling right now. We're starting to get, New York just announced gyms are opening. You know, there are places that are starting to say, we're going to be all right. New York Times had a big piece on actual herd immunity being much lower than what was initially thought. This is the New York Times, 10 to 20%, some experts claim. New York Times piece. Who's been telling you that for weeks? It's the only narrative that makes sense, friends. The only narrative. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. But the Democrats have a big problem here because a country that isn't miserable, a country that isn't feeling like it has no future, isn't going to vote for the buffoonish Biden and Kamala Harris, who now they're feverishly rewriting the history of what they thought of her. In January, the top liberal outlets were saying not a, uneven campaigner, not inspiring. Now it's great campaigner, very inspiring. Oh, look at that. What a change. What a change. They're concerned because there's at least one poll now that shows Biden and Trump for registered voters within 4. Within 4 as of August, with the country going through all the challenges that it has, which is clearly going to favor the challenger over the incumbent, that perception right now. Within 4, down from 14 points pretty recently. There's a shift in perception right now. There are reasons for this, which we'll be discussing. Of course, the sense of getting out from under COVID, despite the Democrats' best efforts to keep us as locked down as possible, to make us as miserable for as long as possible. And then the very clear divide between lawlessness and order and decency and stability in society. The Democrats are openly the party of the mob. They are the party of the rampaging hordes attacking your business, burning down your building, and showing up outside your home.